Hey, surprise! I'm on camera, everybody. I should be live. Everybody should be seeing this. Today, we're doing something a little different. I was going to have Discordant Dragons tonight, but for very good reason, I decided not to, and we're going to do something a little different today. What I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to be hosting a stream from Uzalu and the Cabal with me and Aydin via my stream, and we're going to stream together. We're going to cross the streams. And what we're going to do, I'm going to turn my camera off shortly, but the reason I decided not to do Discordant Dragons today is it's basically the same news and the same crap as last week. And this morning, when I sat down with all the news and all the memes and stuff, I was like, you know what? This is just going to be a repeat of last week. And I don't like to do something when my heart's not in it as a content creator. So what was my heart in the mood for? Well, one of my besties down in Australia sent me something that got my mind a working. And I decided to pitch an idea to Aydin and Uzalu, and they both thought it was a good idea. So we're going to have a conversation about Neo-Feudalism and the future of what I think will be agriculture and farming. And we are both the product and the implements in this particular farm. But we're going to get to that later. First, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and pop off camera because this is not a cam show. I just wanted to say howdy to everybody. And what I would like to do is encourage everyone to share the link out because this is on YouTube for a change. This is Corner Club. It's a Corner Club segment. Excuse me. Share the link out, invite your friends, because here in a few minutes, we're going to have on both Aydin and Uzalu. And we're going to be going over some very disturbing documentation and legislature that came from Dan Andrews and Victoria down in Australia. And we're going to go through that, look at a little bit of commentary, or look at a little bit of the minutia in the giant 180-page legal document. And hopefully that's going to be a good launching point for a fun conversation with two of my favorite public speakers. So before we get started, I would like to remind everyone, you can support this channel like the fine people on Subscribestar, like the fine people that support me on Entropy. You can find all the links of how to financially support me in the description below. I'm not going to be putting out links today. For sake of time, I want to get things moving and I want to try things out to make sure that this goes according to plan. So to help things get started, we're going to bring on the one, the only, the lovely Aydin Paladin. Aydin, thank you for being here again. How you doing today, sister?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent.
I have a little bit of a sore throat, actually more than a little bit, but it doesn't appear to have affected my voice, so that's good.
Alrighty, I am sending Uzalu the message right now, letting him know that we are live and ready for him whenever we get started. Let me just hold on a second. I forgot that I'm on my work laptop, and I still haven't got the keyboard repaired because, well, I'm poor and busy, so I haven't had time to get it repaired yet. All right. I think that this is working. Yeah, there we go. Okay, keyboard working. There we go. All right. So, Aydin, do you know much about what's going on underneath Dan Andrews in Victoria, Australia?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, I'm going to pull the audience here. Audience, all of you in the live chat, while we're getting all of this set up on the back end, let me know if you know or have heard of Dan Andrews, Victoria, Australia, and what he and his ilk have been up to for the last year or so in Australia, because that's going to be the jumping off point for our conversation tonight. And I'm just curious if you guys know. So what we're going to do is to keep in mind, we are going to be talking about a dense piece of legislation. For those of you out there who are policy wonks and like to dig through that kind of thing, the link to this is in the description. And I'm also going to be placing it in the chat for you guys if you want to follow along and go data mining this complex, difficult to understand document. So here it is. It is in the chat right now. Hey, Raging Mandrill. I see you over there on D-Live, my friend. I have been having trouble with Odyssey today on the creator end. I don't know if that means it's not working or not, but if you have issues with Odyssey, I'm sorry. It's been hit and miss for me the last couple of weeks. I think they're working on something there. Whenever I reach out to them, they say that they're working on it. Good evening, Kizza. I see you here moderating. Thank you so much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I've got all my places going. We've got everything, all of our ducks in a row, and I have let Uzalu know that we are ready for him when it's time for him to join. So what I'm going to do is I have several links prepared in order of things that I want to share. And whenever we have Uzalu with us, we're going to quickly go through those as sort of an introduction to what I want to talk about today and walk you all through the steps that brought me to wanting to talk about this with you guys tonight, as well as a little refresher on who Dan Andrews is and what he's been up to down in Australia. So let's see. Let me get all these open. All right, looking good, looking good. Okay, and then last but not least, here is this that we need to get to. And okay, let's go ahead and open this. And all right. And I think that's it. That is all that we need to open. Okay, we have all the things open, and hopefully that means we're going to have a hold on just 1 second. Hopefully that means that we're going to have a Uzalu soon. Let me, I can't type an ampersand, so I don't really know how to get to, I tell you what, I will PM him and let him know that we're ready. I know that that's frustrating for him, but no, I'm gonna do my best to just let him know in the chat. All right. I apologize for you guys. This is something I've never done before, trying to merge streams as a live streamer. So hopefully in the future, this will be smoother. Aydin, let me ask you a question.
Sure thing.
When it comes to the lockdown shenanigans and how bad it's been in Australia, how much of the particulars of that do you know when it comes to policy and legislation?
I mean, I've seen the camps. In terms of the actual legislation, I'm not sure about the specifics on it. Mostly, I've looked on it at what was going on in Australia with just kind of horror. It doesn't seem good, but I know very little about the legal precedent and the specifics.
Okay. Basically, from what I know, Victoria has been the worst for all of it. And I think that after reading about Dan Andrews and having Australian people tell me about what's going on, I think I know why, but we can get into that later. Just waiting for Uzalu here. Hopefully he will jump on with us.
Yeah, I came here to get educated on the Australia thing.
All right. I haven't heard of Boop yet, so I don't think that means that he is ready to join via the lobby. All right. While we're sitting here waiting, I am going to put a link to join the Cabal community if you would prefer that interface. The Cabal, this stream, of course, will be broadcast there in the Golden Age Discord server for the Cabal. Hello, Jim. I see you there on DLive. And oh, we actually have a lot of people on YouTube today. Hello, everybody on YouTube. We have 25 over on YouTube today. That's a lot for me. I heard the noise. That means we're getting a new. Ah, there he is.
Hello there.
Hello. Hopefully, audio's working well. You are loud and clear in my interface.
Yep, it seems to be fine. Looks like you got coming through on my stream as well. Excellent. Is there anything on the back end of Restream that you know of that shouldn't be shown on stream?
No, you can just pipe it directly in from the interface that you see here on Restream. I even do that on my own streams, and I even stream this directly to the Cabal sometimes. So you're more than welcome to show anything that's on this screen. All
right, fantastic.
And for those lovelies over in Cabal, I'm sorry I can't participate much there. My work laptop is on its last legs, and it is redlining with its dying battery and broken keyboard. So I'm doing my best to limit my resources. Hopefully I'll be able to get this repaired for just a couple $100 here in the near future, and all should be well. So Uzalu, Aydin, the reason I wanted you guys to talk about this with me today is one of my besties, someone very close to me, sent me a tweet, which I'm about to share right now, about something horrific that apparently happened in Australia. Now, I'll ask you the same thing that I asked Aydin just a minute ago, Uzalu. Do you know who Dan Andrews is, the premier in Victoria down in Australia?
Not familiar with him, no.
Okay. He is, in my opinion, a globalist plant. He's basically a WEF yes man. But anyway, what we're going to look at is the tweet first. We'll go ahead and have a look at that. The tweet here that my friend sent me says, Victoria, Australia, Premier Dan Andrews is passing a bill that prohibits people from growing their own food. The Agricultural Legislation Amendment Bill 2022 has had its second reading in Parliament. Biosecurity is stated as the reason for the changes. And it goes on to say, increased enforcement power, searching of property, persons without property and persons without a warrant, increased fines, landholder consent no longer required for officers to take samples, animals, and documents. Now, of all of this, here's Dan Andrews. As you can see, he is a spiteful mutant. And you might imagine when I described him to you earlier, this face might have come to mind. But
more or less.
Of this tweet, the only thing I can't confirm is this first part. Now, this, I believe, is someone projecting what could be done from this legislation. There is nothing in this legislation I could find in my 2 hours of studying it today that specifically prohibits people from growing their own food. It just gives not voted for appointees by this man the ability to mess you up real bad with fines, investigations, and seizure of your property if they just come and mess up your private grow farm or your small growing business. So I think this is a bit of a reach from what I could tell, but in context with what we know Dan Andrews and the globalist crew were up to in Victoria, I think that this is likely the goal, even if that's not what it says in the legislation. So let's go ahead and leave this clickbait thing to the side right now, and we're just going to focus on what the thing actually is. So I'm going to pause for a minute, let you two speak while I pull up the next thing. So you guys go ahead and kibitz for a minute here.
Well, again, not something I'm shocked to see, even if that's a misinterpretation the way it's explained there. Not something I'm shocked to see coming out of Australia. I mean, it seems like people have already given up so many of their rights over the last 2 years and to make them more reliant on the government. After all, that's the thing. You're going to have to come back and get your next booster, or you can't work, right? And it's just another way to make people more reliant on the government so they can't live off the grid.
We should probably... I'm not trying to suggest that it justifies it, but we should at least familiarize ourselves and our audience with why they care about quote-unquote biosecurity in the first place, just as a backdrop for the conversation. Because I'm sure that what they're doing, because I've looked into this a bit, it looks like they're just giving themselves carte blanche powers with that as a justification. We should at least know why that justification works at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would you like to elaborate on that? Because I don't have a particular answer for that.
All I know is that they care a lot about their biosecurity. They don't allow if you try and take soil into Australia, you will have more trouble than if you try and take a gun, probably, or about the same. You'll have a lot of trouble trying to take soil in, or any sort of animal. Smuggling an animal in is not good. They will be very unhappy with you. But I don't know exactly why.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why either. Could go back to them being a prison colony and them having to be really, I don't know, but go ahead.
I'll tell you why. It's because Australia is isolated in terms of its ecology. So the plants and animals that live there are not supposed to be introduced to invasive species. There's actually a big problem, I believe, with cats in some areas where the cats, their population, even though it's freaking Australia, where everything can kill them.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at. Is it's an isolated community on an island, so it might just be a part of the culture. And I've never lived on an island, but Aydin has. Is it like that where you live too?
No,
it's not just about it being an island. It's an island that was separated from the rest. I understand what you mean, I think, Aydin. An island that was separated from the rest of the world, from Pangaea, or what it became, a long, long time ago. And so it'd be like coming over when colonists from Europe came over to the Americas, and there were already former conquerors there who were originally Asian. They couldn't handle the diseases that we had. They fucked them up. And I don't know how apocryphal that story is, but it's the same idea. You introduce things that have developed in a foreign land that the locals have no defenses against because they haven't encountered them themselves, and it fucks them up.
And as it applies to agriculture in particular, something that you might be familiar with is that you get these invasive species again because not just in humans spreading disease and animals that are not designed for that environment, having no natural predators, but also in plants, for example, that are just not from that area being invasive. I'm sure you're familiar with kudzu.
Oh, yes. It's all over the place here. You can't get rid of it.
Horrible shit that grows all over the place. That was introduced. It's an Asian plant, and it was introduced to I don't remember what exactly they want to do with it originally. Some kind of just a foliage to put out for in your hedge or whatever. And now it is so invasive. It started out with just a few plants, and now anywhere you go down the south, it's just everything is covered in kudzu because that's what kudzu does, and it lives well in that environment, and it just eats up and grows over top of all the existing plants. Same thing with a lot of again imported animals. Like there's a terrifyingly disgusting snake fish that they released in the river in DC. And so now they've had problems with a hideous snakefish for years, just killing all the local fish. But there's countless examples of that. It's why you can't get water chestnuts in some places, because it's also a very invasive species, and they want people to plant water chestnuts. That's all. That's why I'm sure that is why, in terms of what their explanation for biosecurity is something to do with preventing non-native species from taking over.
So I hear from a member of my chat, Clever Duck, that basically, if anyone claims to be part of the enforcement, if anyone claims to be an enforcement officer, you have to give them your stuff. So, Jade, I think are you Australian? I can't remember. There's some people in chat who are Australian. I'm an enforcement officer. Mike, give me your stuff.
I'm an enforcement officer too. I would like a caramello and a giant Dr. Pepper. Go fetch it. Okay, well, before we move further, I would like to address this tweet, the tweet that we looked at earlier. Now, that is a common sentiment, not just from that one tweet, but it's a common sentiment that's going around Australia. And this is a response that came out almost immediately after this document, this second reading in Parliament of this document. And this here, we're going to skip all of it because this is just, Victorian. This is the Victorian Farmers Federation, clearly part of government or connected to it. And down here, very, very, very important thing. It wants to address the misinformation about the bill, because the misinformation suggests that the bill gives authorized officers the ability to undertake searches without a warrant, without landholder consent, and without the requirement to present identification. The VFF believes this misrepresents and misinterprets the amendment. Now, I'd like to point out, this doesn't refute that. It just says it misrepresents it, because these things here, search and seizure without a warrant, and in some cases not even having to present ID, this is actually in what we're going to look at today. This actually does exist, now enshrined in law in Victoria. But it does, of course, come with some caveats. But the most worrying thing is these appointed officers, they just have to be appointed by the Premier in Victoria. So this Dan Andrews fellow can just appoint whoever he wants to really, really put the boots to people that try to grow livestock and produce or trade livestock and produce if he doesn't like them. So keep that in mind as we go forward here. Now,
it's one of those laws that does not limit the authority, merely relies on them having good intentions, which of course they invariably won't at some point, even if they do now, which is rare.
I also do love that framing of, it's not that you're wrong, you just misunderstood. We'll clarify for you to tell you the right thoughts to have about the factual
I wouldn't even mind that if they had a basis for argument, but it didn't look like they presented one. Yizz says that in the article they didn't present one. Yeah, if they could actually demonstrate what we got wrong.
Well, it just reminds me. It reminds me so much of a, Snopes or a Politico or a Politico fact checker. It's like, mostly false, but what was false was some minor element of the story or something like that.
Yeah. All right. So the next thing I'm going to share. Let's see, I want to share these in chronological order here. That's from December 2021, and this is from October. Yeah, we're going to start with the October one here. I want to show you just two quick little articles. Now, they're from Daily Mail, of course, so they're going to be loaded. But this is just to refresh you on, give you a little refresher who Dan Andrews is here. Dan Andrews, this is from October of last year, just about 7 months ago. Dan Andrews plans to give himself unlimited power to declare pandemics even with 0 cases and jail Victorians for 2 years if they break restrictions, halfway to becoming law.
Jesus Christ.
Well, I made a video about this last year. And then here we see Premier Dan Andrews' pandemic legislation passes the lower house. The bill will be debated in Parliament upper house. Victoria's state of emergency laws set to expire in 21 months. Premier Daniel Andrews wants to pass sweeping new laws to replace them. And guess what? They did. The health minister will have the power to enforce lockdowns and quarantine on his own. He can declare whatever he wants in the province of Victoria. And there are fines for individuals and businesses that go against. Now, we're going to can that article and look at one more from just 2 or 3 months later here. And up it goes. This one, Dictator Dan's power grab is complete. This is from December 2021, so just 2 months after the other one. Premier Andrews gets unprecedented control over Victorians as controversial pandemic bill passes both houses of Parliament after thousands protest the new laws. Now, for those of you that don't know what this is, I'm going to sum it up for you. Basically, just like Palpatine in the prequel movies, he put new legislation into place that gives the premier and his appointed cabinet the ability to not only declare a health emergency, but also to declare when something is or is not likely to contribute to, cause, or is a pandemic within Victoria. And you need to keep that in mind for some of the things we're going to read about this produce and meat stuff here in a little bit. So I just wanted that sort of to wet your whistle. Now, I know that I spoke a lot, so I'm going to be quiet when you guys talk.
All I'm saying is George Lucas was a prophet ahead of his time.
He sure was. Artistic genius.
And whatever you think about the prequels, the Palpatine story was pretty good.
That is true, actually.
I mean, I liked old Pappy because he was the only one having a good time in those movies.
Exactly
he was the only one with any character, with any drive. Like everybody else was just a boring, dead, wet fish. He was the only one
he's
that had motivation and was having fun.
He just loves being evil so much. It is the best thing about the prequels now that I think about it. just reveling in it.
We had a paid chat come in on Entropy I'm going to get to real quick. Kizza, who's a friend of Aydin and mine, who's been active in the Cabal for a while. Kizza, for $5 says, Yizz, Aydin, and Uzalu, during 2020, did Australia become very conservative, considering that it returned to being a prison colony as it was meant to be? Ha 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 ha. Very good. Very good.
I don't know about that, but I do know that I looked at some data when I was researching the monarchy stuff that shows that there's been an increasingly, like a pretty significant upward trend in support for the British monarchy in Australia since 1970, like a marked increase year by year. So I don't know if they've become more libertarian, but they appear to be, or more fascist, but appear to be more monarchic, at least if the trend continues.
Queen Elizabeth is a very strong argument for monarchy, but she's pretty much the only living one I know of. Hopefully, if they skip a generation and it goes straight to William and Kate, I think it is, then it'll be better. Like they seem all right.
Yeah, I think though, if you're living in a totalitarian, I'm just saying, if you're living in the increasingly clearly totalitarian state of Australia, which is a totalitarian under a democracy, you might be sitting there going, well, what other options do we have on the potential table here?
Well, you guys know me. I've said it on both your channels before. I am not a strong proponent of any socioeconomic or rulership system that came before. I think they've all been tried, they've all failed, and they've led us to where we are now. I think whatever we have and whatever we build in the future that works for us is going to be something new. It's not going to be a repeat of National Socialism or democracy or monarchy. It's going to be something new that arises to meet the needs of whatever people are building it for, whatever nightmare hellscape of cyberpunk dystopia we're moving into. So I do my best to keep an open mind and just do my best to speak the truth as I see it.
The next phase will be top-down AI control, and we're not quite there yet.
I worry that
Singularity was supposed to be 2030, wasn't it? Or 2040?
Wouldn't necessarily need the singularity. If you fed it enough data, give it enough processing power, you could do it now.
Probably. I would imagine.
Similarly to self-driving cars. Mm-hmm. But whether people will actually accept that, they certainly won't right now, and that's for the best. So I think we'll get at least one more cycle of something else before that starts to become implemented. And then it'll be terrible the first time.
Yes.
People will have to suffer through it for decades. And then maybe we'll have a resurgence of non-AI control, and then gradually it'll get better and better, and it'll actually become acceptable one day, I expect. But it will suck for a lot of people for a long time.
I dropped both the links for what we're looking into the live chat in the Cabal, so you guys can have it too. What I'm going to put up first is this is the second reading, the final reading before it was passed in the Victorian Parliament here. Now, this is, of course, really long. I'm not going to narrate all of this because look how long this is. Look at all of this. It's quite long. It's like, I think, 16 or 17 full paragraphs, and it's not very interesting. But here it is. Miss Allen read, I move that this bill now be read a second time. I ask that my second reading speech be incorporated into Hansard. Incorporated as follows, yada, yada, yada. This bill is 11 acts to improve the efficiency, operation, administration, and enforcement of these 7 things. And I'm going to go through them real quick and highlight them. This is the amendment to the Agricultural and Veterinary Chemicals Control of Use Act in 92. amendments to the Catchment and Land Protection Act of 94, amendments to the Dairy Act of 2000, amendment to Drug Poison Controlled Substances 81, amendments to Farm Debt Mediation Act. We'll get to this later. This is important. Amendments to the Livestock Disease Control Act, also important. We'll get to later. Meat industry stuff from 93. And then the thing that we're going to look at most is the Plant Biosecurity Act of 2010. And this is the one, in my opinion, that has the scariest stuff in it. And then, of course, they add a few things here to Veterinary Practice Act and Rural Assistance Schemes. Now, I'm going to be honest, I did not have the time or the willpower once I got to this part to finish the 180-page legalese document. So I don't really know what's going to be in the rural assistance schemes and veterinary practices. It could be all matter of hell in there. I don't know. But we had enough for a full stream to this point, so that's what I'm going to focus on. But there is one thing that we're going to look at here together. So while I pull that up and get it ready, I'm going to be quiet and let you two speak.
Well,
I hate to jump to the end here, but what I expect this is going to end up being is they actually can find a justification where in some cases they weren't. Like people who are messing around either deliberately or unintentionally or non-maliciously with biosecurity issues are able to evade the law because the law regulates itself as it should. So they probably will have some sort of justification. However, as in most things in nature, there is more than one purpose. The people writing these laws almost certainly realize this will be very useful if we ever want to enforce it on a whim. Now, that's even being generous. Maybe they don't have that kind of good justification. I agree with you,
and I have something to say on that later, but I'm going to wait until later for all those ideas in my head.
And that's the whole thing, too, about this, is that, like, even if they put it under the, auspices of, well, hopefully we'll never have to use it, it's just in case, or it's in the case of actual issues of biosecurity where you have someone introducing a foreign species. That's not how it ever gets. I mean, never in the history of when you give the government power do they elect to not use it. I mean, yeah, I've had that conversation with Dev, and he brought up a situation where he said, no, sometimes government gives power back. And he brought up the situation where the Canadian government forcefully relocated a bunch of Native Americans so they could build an army base there during World War II. There's some kind of military base. And then, they did give them their land back 60 years later. So it's like, look, the government doesn't always just take. They sometimes give back. I mean, that was the argument he gave to me about it. And I was like, I don't find that very compelling.
Yeah, he would need more than one very bad example to make a case about a trend.
That too, obviously. But I mean, he's Canadian, so he's aware of this. And I mean, I'm sure that you could probably find one or a handful of examples. But generally speaking, when the government gives itself power, they don't tend to give it back to the people. At least I can't think of a prominent one. Or anyone. Yeah, I can't think of a prominent example of that. Government only seems to expand.
It reminds me of a quote read by the late Leonard Nimoy from, I think, Civ 3 or Civ 4. And it was, the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the ever-expanding bureaucracy. It reminds me of that because the more power that these cretins get in this system, it's just sort of this never-ending cycle of having to necessitate your funding each year, wanting to always extend into other branches of the same body so you can have sway for the one that you think is the best and that kind of shit. And it's just this whole Ouroboros of garbage. But anyway, speaking of garbage, you might expect what you think is read out loud is what you would expect. None of this on the surface sounds very dangerous or scary. It's just about like a lot of boring political talk at the legislative level. It lays out what all of the bills are going to do because certain things need clarified to be up to speed with what we now know. Certain things need to be changed to work with modern technology and phone apps and that kind of stuff. Not very interesting. But what is interesting is the mention of this here at the meat industry thing. This bill removes the ambiguity about the application of the Public Administration Act from 2004 to prime safe employees and clarifies that all public sector employees are now subject to the values and principles set out in that act. Other minor amendments to the Meat Industry Act will improve its operation and provide greater clarity on the safety regulatory framework for meat, including the regulatory arrangement that applies to packaged meat.
Oh, okay. So I know what this is about then. What they're claiming it's about is ostensibly. Again, what governments end up actually doing with this power once they give it to themselves is not necessarily related to what they claim it's for. But their concern probably is that they don't want people to get sick, or that's what they're claiming. They want people to get sick because they're growing their own plants or raising their own livestock that aren't going to be held up to industry standards. I would say that one thing about that, living on this island, is like everyone's got chickens. So you want to talk about a high trust society. This is unrelated somewhat, but people have chickens and they grow vegetables in their gardens. And they'll have a little box in front of their house, just an open box that no door on it or anything, and they'll just leave eggs and fruit, vegetables and fruit or whatever they've grown. And it's if you want to take the produce, just leave money, and just leave it out. It's facing the street, and people still do that.
Honesty tables. We have. I've seen some in real life. That's the kind of thing that you used to be able to do in most Western countries with high trust. Yep. Now you only see that in very rural areas.
Yep. Here where I grew up, we still have a little bit of that. Most of the little family stores and community meeting places where they had that kind of thing, well, it's just all grown up and nobody's used it for 20 years now. So that stuff has just kind of gone away. Now, I still think in mostly homogenous places in the West, we probably still could have some version of that if we protect ourselves better with localism. But that's a discussion for another time.
But if you also have, but the thing is too, if you have big daddy government going, well, we don't want people to buy some eggs that haven't then because they're not, or buy milk that's not pasteurized or something, because it could be a health risk. So that would be the explication there of, you can't just, I guess in this case you can't even have your own eggs because it's not regulated by the government.
Well, speaking of being regulated by the government, we're going to segue directly into Prime Safe. Now, what is Prime Safe, you might ask? Well, I'm not a meat and produce vendor in Victoria or in Australia at all. So I don't really know what Prime Safe is, but this is the way it works. Prime Safe is the private sector. And that's, of course, I whispered into the mic because we all know that these things are, of course, connected to the government. Prime Safe is the statutory authority responsible for regulating meat, poultry, seafood, and pet food in Victoria, Australia. Prime Safe's primary objective is the provision of safe, wholesome meat, poultry, and seafood for all consumers. Now, here's the thing. You can type in almost anything here to their online check. Anything that you type in, whether it be seafood, kebabs, hamburgers, what did I try earlier? Salad. I tried vegan wraps. I tried a whole bunch of stuff. I just tried typing it in. It always tells you that you need a license and that you have to register yourself with these people to be a vendor of any kind of food or food service at all. So that's how that shit rolls here. And that's not really a surprise. Most cities, especially more populated ones, they do have this kind of regulatory committee or procedure you have to go through, just so you can't be some random Joe Schmo that's trying to sell rat kebabs out of
sure.
Box, right?
Again, you try putting in feet pics and see if they want you to get a license for
that. No, I didn't try that. I didn't try anything scandalous. No. But the thing is, this what you need to know going forward is, in Victoria, they have a statutory authority that, again, is a mix of government and private, and people that run this are a mix of appointed and employed that the public doesn't know about and that no one votes for or who organize this. And you have to work within their parameters, or your van, your store, your stock can be confiscated and held without compensation if you violate their statutes. And you can be fined and put in prison if you continue to operate in defiance of what Prime Safe dictates. So that is what I discovered from reading this website and Googling the questions that I had about it in Google Auth. So this is not a joke. This is exactly how things work in Victoria when you want to trade food of any kind. So,
I mean, again, it does make sense for the purpose of public health. If you're talking about a restaurant that is serving rat kebabs, or that has, actual health code violations where they're serving people food that would make them sick, and charging for it. However, there is a big difference, in my mind at least, between selling a product that could be harmful, and versus growing your own vegetables and raising your own livestock that for your consumption.
Yeah. We have some community engagement I'm going to get to before we move into the actual meat and potatoes here. We're 30 minutes in with Uzalu. This is perfect. Everything's going. What'd you get?
Oh, because we're talking about meat and potatoes.
Yeah, very good.
Sorry.
All right. Oh my God, we have a lot of, okay. I didn't check entropy for a few minutes. We have a bunch over here. We have 5 more from Kizza, each one of these. I'm sorry, 4 more from Kizza, each one for $5 US. He has some things to say to the panel. First, for $5 US, Kizza says, Aydin, funny you mentioned eggs and government. Do you and others remember the European contaminated egg scandal from 2017?
I do recall it only because I looked it up because I was doing research on it and involved it.
Kizza in that same comment says eggs from a farm are better than from the store. I agree. I eat farm fresh eggs too. I get them locally. They're only like $5 a dozen. That's quite a bit compared to the ones at the store, but the ones at the store, the taste and the quality, even though you can get them for like $2.50 a dozen, it's worth paying double the price to get nice full size farm fresh eggs from local chickens.
Yes, it is. It is nice. But the scandal, I think it was a salmonella issue, or and that if that happened in 2017, there was another case I think that was several decades ago, which might actually be what I'm thinking about, where it caused this had to have been in like the 80s, and it was in the UK as well though, and some parts of Europe I think in addition, where there was an issue with salmonella, and it destroyed the poultry industry because people didn't want to buy eggs. They got terrified of eggs, and that lasted for years. It caused longitudinal, pretty seriously demonstrable damage to that industry, all because of a scare that turned out to, and that happened somewhat in the US. I remember when I was a kid, like so in the 90s, there was a lot of fear of salmonella everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that too. It was weird. It was like they were acting like it was some new crazy pandemic, and I'm like, but I've been a kid my whole life. I mean, my whole life when I was a kid, they said, just wash your hands, and if you're, using raw meat, you don't want to get salmonella or parasites, so just clean things up and cook meat. It was never a big deal. And then in the 90s, it was like, oh, salmonella everywhere.
Nah, you want to get that high quality medium rare chicken.
Oh, the best.
Oh my God. Let's move on. Kizza for $5 also says the Sentinel AI we're supposed to get in 2045. Quite frankly, I wouldn't trust an AI to drive, considering they're useless without lines or other days. Never forget AI race cars that turned into a wall at Thruxton.
Now, don't worry about it. You've been training self-driving cars for years. All those stupid click on the traffic lights, click on the bus, click on the whatever, click on the bicycles. You always notice they're usually around cars and roads and stuff. You've been training self-driving AIs for years.
Indeed.
That is true. I did find the article. I put an article about it real quick. It was well, it's from 2017. UK eggs declared safe 30 years after the salmonella scare. So it was only in 2017 that they said, oh, actually
30 years, huh?
Now you can eat regular eggs again.
Kizza again with $5 says, speaking of UK and monarchy, I don't care what Aydin or Spoon says. There'll be hardcore Republicans when Prince Charles becomes king and he's pure WE.
I'm not looking forward to that. I'll put it that way. I mean, you can't expect Lizzie to live forever. She doesn't do much anymore, to be fair. But yeah, that's not something I'm looking forward to.
And last thing from Kizza, he says, for $5 US, speaking of the prequels, Jar Jar Binks represents the useful idiots in politics. Changed my mind. Yes and no. I think that Jar Jar Binks represents George Lucas wants to sell toys and wants the movie to appeal to kids, even though he can't write for kids. And so he puts in a joke of a cartoon rabbit. That's what I think.
It was probably an autistic attempt to add a comic relief. Because Lucas, I'm convinced, is very autistic, and no one told him no.
Yes,
he just had this idea of a comic relief, didn't really play with the idea much before he inserted it, and just no one said no, take it out before the time it went to production, so they just kept it in. But it was always a bad idea, which is why they drastically downplayed Jar Jar for episodes 2 and 3.
And the last on my end of community engagement here, I'm going to refresh everything to make sure I'm not missing anybody. The last thing is from FTW Nil for $10 US. He says, here's a few dollars, Yizz, and puts a hug emoji in there. Well, thank you, friend. I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. And my community engagement, I don't have anything else. Is there any paid chat you want to read out while we're doing the paid chat break there, Uzalu?
There are some. I was going to wait until the end of our collaboration.
Oh, sure. Then we could just wait. That's fine.
Except the ones that are insulting you, of course.
That's great. Yeah, I love direct engagement. So if there are any of the paid chats that come in on your end that you want to read, you can even interrupt what's going on to do that. That's cool with me. I don't mind at all.
Also, real quick, Kizza sent me the article from what happened in 2017, the year that the UK said you can eat eggs again. In that same year, there was another egg scandal in Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, France, and a whole bunch, and 11 other EU states where apparently eggs were contaminated with a pesticide called fipronil. So that as soon as it's okay to eat eggs, it's not okay to eat eggs, I guess. Oh, that's fun.
All right. The main event for tonight is the actual legislation itself. And again, I shared this in the Cabal. It's in the description of the video. I put it in the chats earlier. You guys can all get it. This is from the Parliament of Victoria. Now, this thing, I'm going to scroll down slowly so the stream will capture it. You can see here on the left-hand side, I'm scrolling. It has 183 pages. Now, I am bad at reading in general, but I'm especially bad at reading dense, broken up legalese. So what we're going to do is there are just a couple of things I want to highlight before we move to just general discussion. And before we get rolling here, I have two things I want to talk about that I'm going to highlight and show in the actual notes here. And is there anything in particular so far that I have read or we've talked about that you would like me to jump to immediately, either of you?
Don't think so.
Don't all speak at once. Okay.
Oh, I'm muting myself. Yeah. No, I'm just reading it also at the same time. So, but I don't have any.
No problem.
You know more than both of us clearly about this. So.
Well, I don't know a lot more because, like I said, most of my time prepping this was just trying to fumble my way through this, and I barely retained any legalese that I read. So I had to make myself little notes here of things to look at. Two things that come to mind is about the search and seizure part. This is, let's see, give me just a second to pull it up here. Here we go. Without a warrant. I knew that would find it. All right. This is in section 83EA on document page 51 and I'm sorry, on PDF page 51, document page 45. That's where we're reading from, okay? Now, this is new section 83EA inserted. This comes after section 83EA of the Catchment and Land Protection Act. Searches of personal property. An authorized officer may at any time, without warrant, search any parcel, basket, bag, box, or receptacle for anything which the authorized officer reasonably believes has been, is being, or is likely to be used in the importing, keeping, trading, or releasing of pest animals or noxious weeds in contravention to this act, and may do any one or more of the following. A, inspect and take photographs, including videos, of anything found during the course of the research. That means, oh, hey, I suspect that somewhere on this farm, there might be this insect or this dangerous weed. So I have legal precedent to go through all property, taking pictures and videoing everything I want on my way to that. And I don't even need a warrant to do so. So let's move on to B. With whatever assistance is required, take and keep samples of any of the following found: the blood, bodily fluids, or other matter from any pest animal. Okay, that's reasonable. A noxious weed. Okay, that's reasonable. Or any other thing. Or any other thing. They added this in the legislation. They can take any other thing. This, like, is there a better example that the two of you know of open-ended legalese weasel words than this?
I mean, that's well, yeah, blatant. I do. It's called rights not otherwise enumerated under the right to privacy.
Fair.
I'm dealing with that right now.
Okay,
but I mean, but that's pretty. It's the same exact kind of bullshittery. It's the not otherwise enumerated, not otherwise specified. So it says any other thing. Now, of course, is an idea of what a reasonable person would take out of this, but that's not how the government works.
Oh, we'll get to the word reasonable. And here's the last bits. With whatever assistance is required, destroy, mark, or tag any pest animal found during the course of the research, eliminating any threat posed by the pest animal, or later identifying it. So, does this mean that a man can appointed by Dan Andrews without warrant, without notice, can come to your property, kill your dog, and take your dog's corpse and say, "Oh, that's because I thought it posed a pest threat, and I just need to kill your dog and take it."
I mean, that's how it sounds.
They've leapfrogged the ATF.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is like ATF on steroids, man.
But it sounds like, if they make a mistake, well, they can just take it back and go, "Oh, well, we thought it was a rabid dog, and it wasn't. Sorry, bro."
And here's another thing I find worrying. They added this because of the information age and smartphones. Inspect and make copies of or take extracts from any document found during the course of the search.
Any document.
And it continues, and seize anything found during the course of the search if the authorized officer believes on reasonable grounds that it is necessary to seize the thing in order to prevent its concealment, loss, or destruction.
There's that reasonable shit.
That means they can say, "Oh, well, I have reason to believe that you would delete emails or remove pictures or burn this document. So I'm going to seize every document in your chest of drawers, in your filing cabinet. I'm going to take every mobile device in the home, and I'm going to take your laptop, and I'm going to take the hard drive out of your computer. And I don't have to provide you a warrant for this. And you don't vote for me. And the only thing that I work for is a hybridized, bastardized mixture of an appointment and private company that the dictator of Victoria does to give me this power. I can come to your property under the pretense of there being some type of invasive pathogen or parasite. And we all see what they've done in the news the last 2 years about blowing that up out of proportion and what government overreach has done with that. Well, this is just enshrining in law their ability to do that, to take everything you own under this pretense. And to me, this is one of the two scariest things in this. And I wanted you guys to see this as I went through it together. So I'm going to pause and let you guys kibitz about this, and I'm going to check the chat while you do.
I think the scary thing about this too is that it clearly doesn't really. It can be under they just have to say it's under the auspices of an animal or produce. But they also made it pretty clear, or I guess lack of clear in this case, that they can do it for pretty much any reasons. They just have to say that and take whatever they want and do whatever they want to confiscate your property, as long as they just kind of say, "Well, yeah, we did it under these auspices." And one thing also I think that's concerning is that I think that COVID has pathologized society at large. People were so afraid, and the media and the governments absolutely have reveled in that, because when people get afraid, they want someone to protect them. And in this case, what happened with COVID was, well, daddy government, step on me harder, essentially, to make me feel safe and cozy and comfy, so I don't have to worry about it. And I think that they could get by with this by a lot of people now who are still pathologized by the COVID fear miasma of, well, I wouldn't want someone, having these dangerous animals that have rabies or whatever and caring for them, or growing plants that are going to contain the next big disease that then we'll all have to be afraid of again. I can see the people even being supportive of it, a certain portion of the population.
Uzalu?
Yes. I don't have much to say on this beyond just authoritarianism with a different color. It may well be that they will be leaning on the renewed public passion, read fear about pandemics, as Aydin suggests. But again, it's quite possible that some of the people involved in writing this believe that it will be used well. It's not so much that it definitely won't be, it's just that it allows for very dystopian access to your property, which I'm guessing that they didn't really have a way to do before. There is still going to be a regulating force of, if they try to do this to too many people, they'll get pissed off and want change, regardless of what that change is. They just vote for someone else.
I'm not sure.
But
they put people in
the danger
in
is that they will use it on very few people, just the exact people who have already been ejected from society. And if they do it that strategically, they can maintain a very strong, cohesive authoritarian system.
Right, and to suggest that it doesn't have the possibility to be used as a purely political tool to eliminate individuals that you think are deleterious to your regime, so people who live off the grid and are probably a little bit more conservative, for example, and or libertarian, well, you can eliminate those people pretty easily, seize their land and their property indefinitely for pretty much any reason.
Yep. The last thing I'll say on this before we move on to the other thing is the thing that I found most disturbing about this. Let's see, let me scroll to it here. This: inspect and make copies of or take extracts from any document. Like this to me is really worrisome, because in the course of an investigation, we all know why big companies and organizations don't ever want to go to a proper court because of the discovery phase, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want their documents, their emails, their pictures, their correspondence with friends, family, whatever, or even darker things like back channeling and setting up lobbyists to do ABC. They don't want that to be discovered. Well, this thing here, like, think about this from the private end. Let's say in Australia, you're working on localism, the thing I preach about all the time. You want to build a community of people that don't need big daddy government, that don't need the corporations, that don't need the NGOs. You and the people, like, let's say you work with 20 families in a rural area in Australia, right? You don't want to be a problem. You're not doing anything illegal. You just want to grow produce, grow food, have your own livestock. Well, this means that some asshole from the government that is appointed by the dictator there can come out there and say, oh, well, we suspect that there's some kind of parasite here. And they can go through every single person's subsistence farm, take every phone, make copies of everything they have, get all their friends lists, look at their Telegram, and take it all from you. And then everyone there is automatically, all of their documents, everything they've done, everyone they've traded with for months or years is immediately in the hands of this dictator. And they don't even have to provide a warrant when they show up to do all this. So that's, to me,
it's truly egregious. Without a warrant for any reason, and what does this have to do, this element of taking documents, what does that have to do with livestock that could have parasites or disease? I don't. I mean, I guess you would say
again, like if it's organized, if it's organized biohazard smuggling, like there's a small portion of very wealthy people who desperately want the next big animal, then right. you could have a small industry of biohazard smugglers, and maybe that's what they're trying to crack down on here. As I said, there probably is some sort of legitimate example that they would use to justify doing this.
Oh, for sure.
It's just that through the back door, of course, they're letting it slip the fact that they can use this to basically take anyone's property at any time for any reason.
And the thing here is, let us not forget. Well, I'm going to save that for later. Let's go ahead and move on to the second thing I wanted to highlight and talk about in the document, if that's okay with you guys. You guys okay to move on?
Go ahead.
Yeah, all good.
All righty. All right. Now, I made a note here, page 118 to 124. 118 to 124. So we're going to go ahead and move on down to 118 to, oops, I overshot it. All right. I'm just going to type it in. I think that'll be better. There we go. Okay, here we go. Information collection. This is where we're going to start with this. Information collection. Let's embiggen. There we go. Now, you guys can see this okay, right? Uzalu, Aydin, you guys can see this just fine?
I've got my own copy of it.
Oh, okay, good. All right. This is 134 information collection starting on page 117.
I know. I've got it.
Slideshow 123. Okay. All right. Okay, that's not... Okay, here we go. The analysis of the information and the publication of the information in accordance with the act or the regulation by the act or regulations by under which the records are required to be kept by the secretary. Now, this to me is legalese that is an addendum to something simpler earlier that can probably branch out and include things like data analysis and more digital information of the digital age. Since this, 93, not a lot of smartphones yet, that kind of thing. So let me hold on. I highlighted this for a reason. There's something else in here. Let me check my notes again. Okay. I'm sorry. That's not the thing I needed to highlight and read. Let me get to it here. Okay. I don't need to highlight it. We're just going to talk about it. This part here talks about tagging and monitoring livestock that are under investigation. And of course, that can be your dog, that can be your goat, that can be your sheep. And then here we have, wait, no, I'm not quite there yet. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Records kept by the secretary under subsection 1 may be made available to a relevant person. This is it. This is it. If the secretary is satisfied that making the record available is in the public interest, will prevent, monitor, or control the spread of disease, and will assist the relevant person to protect domestic or export markets for livestock and livestock products. Now, the reason I highlighted this, if we know from the document that a person who is appointed by the dictator does not need to present to you document, they just show up and take what they want and document what they want. The secretary, once this information gets back to the secretary, is allowed to make all of that information available to whomever they deem necessary for public interest to prevent, monitor, or control the spread of a disease. Now, what has been in the news and what have they beaten us to death with for the last 2 years? Public health, right? So now this is basically carte blanche to go to someone that is trying to live off the grid or apart from the system, take all of their material and livestock, and then dox them to the state and dox them to the media. This is what scares me, is this setting up a legal way to dox everyone connected to dissidents. And this is why I think this is in here, is they know how powerful doxing is in the information age.
Oh.
And I think this is why they want this enshrined in their ordinances. What do you guys think?
Oh, for sure. The doxing thing is part of it. See the case of, what's her name? That horrible Twitter lady, the alleged journalist. Shoot.
God, you're going to have to narrow it down.
Oh, I know. Tim Pool brought out a billboard about her. I've talked about her on stream.
I know you're talking about it. I don't remember her name. Crap.
Taylor Lorenz. And the whole thing there is, what she was doing is her entire career has been doxing people because she absolutely knows the power that it has to destroy somebody's life. So what do? You the government goes and investigates some problem with animals or produce or whatever. Doesn't have to find an issue, can just seize it and then post facto explain why they did it. And then really at that point it's in their hands. Why wouldn't they just make stuff up? I don't see why not. They could then just lie, or they could tell the truth. Either way. But
now again, this is my opinion. Check with CNN to validate this, because remember, we're on YouTube. So what I'm saying right now is just opinion. Check with CNN and MSNBC for the truth. But I believe that what we've been told all along about the coup, about elections, about war, about the Patriot Act, about weapons of mass destruction. Let's go all the way back to my childhood. And let's talk about AIDS.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Iran-Contra. Okay? I think what we've been told all along has been almost entirely, if not entirely, fabricated specifically for the reasons you just said, Aydin.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, the video I'm finishing up right now, that's what it's about. There's something called belief echoes. It's the persistency of information, right? So it doesn't really matter. There's two effects, primacy effect and recency effect. There's not actually really good evidence for the existence of the latter, of the recency effect. But what the primacy effect is that people tend to remember what they hear about a subject first. It's why media framing is so important. There's a lot of research that shows that even after you correct a fake news story, right? You write a fake news story, you show it to people, and then you show them another article that's got a correction and says, actually, you were wrong about that. They still end up remembering a good portion, just still remember whatever they saw first. So the point is, it doesn't matter if, like WMDs in Iraq, right? I actually have some studies on that. A significant portion of people continued to believe that even after that was no longer being used as the excuse, right? It's like, well, we actually didn't find any. People years later still believe there were WMDs in Iraq. And that's the point.
I'm told they did find WMDs, just not nukes.
Yeah, but yes, they did find weapons. But the way that WMD, again, that's kind of clever on their side, legal language there. So that what is a weapon of mass destruction? Well, it turns out it's kind of whatever we want. Now, what everyone thought it meant was nukes, because that's what
nukes or missiles loaded with dangerous chemical payloads. That's another thing that was in the news at the time 20 years ago. Was they've got this kind of gas and this kind of blah, blah, blah. They've got biolabs in Russia and
anthrax.
That's how it was back then. And so, now I was alive and paying attention to both the news and to politics at the time. And politicians and media pundits 20 years ago, God, it's been forever ago now, when they were talking about this, they absolutely led us to believe that old Saddam Hussein and his compatriots and all them absolutely had maybe nukes, but definitely had Russian knockoff missiles loaded to bear with all matter of dangerous biochemical stuff just ready to use. They led us all to believe that.
Oh, yeah, for years. And again, those belief echoes remain. And when, if the government does this kind of stuff and they come out and lie about somebody and then correct it later, a lot of people won't ever hear that retraction, won't hear the correction.
All right. Well, we are at exactly the 1 hour mark. So to keep things moving, you know how I like to stay on schedule. We have come to the end of what I wanted to share, but I'm going to scroll down just a moment and show you some more things here in this section. Let's see here. Here's another thing. This is about sharing the information that they find and the documentation that they abduct from you with other territories, other states, and other countries to prevent the spread of disease and pathogens. All under the name of protecting livestock and protecting plants and the local flora and fauna. Now, of course, if responsible, moral people were at the helm, I might not think twice about this. But the last 30 years of my life has shown me that the people in charge and in control of all these things are the opposite of moral and responsible. So that's why I worry about all this. So, of course, this document is full of more stuff like this. It just goes on and on. But those are the main points that I wanted to get out. So I'm going to go ahead and kill that. And before we go to discussion about neo-feudalism or the future of farming under this type of auspice, we do have a little more community engagement I want to get to. And surprise, it is Kizza again, wanting to share more with us. Kizza for $5 US. So based on this legalese, can I take anything I want from the government as I am a conquering Englishman and do as I wish in order to put them in their place? I want clarification. I think we know the answer to that. Moving on. For $5 US, Kizza says, this is another quote from Civilization, the game. He says, those who give up liberty for security deserve neither liberty nor security. They only deserve tyranny and enslavement. I think that quote is attributed to Franklin, but I don't know the exact source of that.
No. I think you'll find that was originally from Leonard Nimoy from Civ 5.
Right.
Ah, yes. Good old Leonard Nimoy. All right. And last but not least, from Kizza for $5 US, he says, the WMDs in question that was found were merely stuff they already knew about from the Gulf War, and that was dismantled. So they ultimately did lie and should all be prosecuted.
Oh, they lied through their fucking teeth on all of that shit for years. And that goes back to my earlier point about the government never gives back power. When, 9/11 happened, and remember the airports, all of a sudden, I didn't live on I think an airplane maybe once or twice. Before that, I was 11 when it happened. So, which is easy to remember because 9/11. But the taking off your shoes at the airport, sometimes they had to swab you down.
Not just that, but taking off your glasses, your hat, having to open up all your bags, they went through everything.
But that never went away, did it? The TSA never went away in terms of
it became standard.
And now it's standard all over the world. Normal. Yeah,
we got a big helping of the new normal after the Patriot Act 20 years ago.
The Patriot Act, yes, is another clear example. The government does not stop once that's not useful anymore. It just expands. And that's why this is that's a pretty scary document, because it has the door wide open to kind of do what the hell ever.
Yep. So the discussion I wanted to have with you guys now what I wanted to cover, it has already been covered. And the conversation point of the stream is I have seen around the world more attacks on farmland and subsistence living people. I have seen lots of farms being burned, attacked. We have South Africa. We have the purposeful fires all across the western part of the United States. We have everyone from eco-terrorists to natives to just general stock leftist lunatics up in Canada, sabotaging trucks, destroying farmland, poisoning supplies of grain and that kind of thing. Like, there are thousands of instances of this just in the last few years that you could read about all across the West. And then you also see BlackRock, Bill Gates, other bazillionaires buying up farmland and buying up residential housing. To me, this says that their revealed preference is not progressivism. It's not democracy. Their revealed preference is for neo-feudalism.
Yeah, I think that's unquestionable.
And I think that when it comes to rich and powerful people, you can never believe what they say, that's stated preference. You have to look at their revealed preference. And the revealed preference here is they genuinely do want us to own nothing and be happy with it. Discuss.
I mean, they said that quiet part out loud, certainly, of own nothing and be happy. And yeah, I think that probably is it. I mean, you can see it through the systematic destruction of the middle class. That certainly seems as evidence to me that, you know, it's a two-class system is what they want. And I do think that it's headed towards neo-feudalism because, well, you know, going back to COVID stuff, you've already created people who are completely dependent on the state in terms of, well, I need to get my next vaccine, I need to get my next booster, whatever. I think that, honestly, all the COVID stuff and the overreaction to it was a test. It was, how far can we push people, really? And how much can we manipulate psychology to get people to essentially sign up to be slaves and to enforce that slavery on others without us in power having to do almost anything. That was the astonishing thing about the pandemic to me, was that people would enforce these rules for no reward. They would enforce authoritarianism on others for no reward at all, other than, well, that's what our masters told us to do, and that's reward in and of itself. So yeah, I would think that's probably why. And I do think there is a move back towards neo-feudalism, because these people do not want anyone to have an actual chance to rise into power to challenge them. That's why they hated Trump so much. Not because of his politics, but it's like, hey, you weren't supposed to do that. You weren't part of and I think he was part of some of the in clubs, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
But you weren't part of the club that's supposed to run for president. And that's why they hated him so much. And I don't think
not all the globalist oligarchs are the same or want the same thing. That's an important
true as well.
Point
that's
out
true
here.
as well. I do
like the ones that are in Putin's camp right now. They probably don't want the same things that the people backing Zelensky in his camp want, for example.
That's for sure. So the U.S. versus Russia is what you mean. But yeah, the Russian oligarchs.
I'm being careful because we're on YouTube.
I know.
So I'm being careful.
But yeah, I do think that probably makes sense. That it's about a return to neo-feudalism, on some making people utterly dependent on the government, unable to escape, unable to rise up. And the best way to do that is if you convince them that they like it, and that's what they asked for.
Yeah, Uzalu, do you think that this assessment is accurate? Do you think that that's what the rich people and the governments and the corporations are pushing us towards, or do you think that assessment is off? I'd like to hear from what you think about it.
It's fairly likely, but there is another possibility. It may be that we are living through the natural effects of overpopulation, something that's been warned about, something that we haven't really seen dire consequences from, but something that may well be happening anyway. Through a massive leap in technology, we've managed to always stay just ahead of it, but it may be that we just can't, especially with a very corrupt society, as we have now, one that's reached the limits of entropy, one that's ready to bring about a crisis, and then possibly consolidate into something more useful afterwards. It may be that people like Gates, people like Soros, others like that are just looking a little bit ahead. Some of them are trying to create chaos deliberately, maybe to accelerate the collapse, the problems that are to come, the crisis. But buying up farmland, it's one of the first things that you would need in a situation like that, especially if the problem is going to be a global supply chain issue. It may just be a worthwhile investment, which means it could just as easily be someone else as it could be Gates. The only problem is if people are precipitating it to happen faster, and if people are refusing to get out of the way for the system to rebuild itself. That is an area where I think there is still hope for mere democracy. Peacefully transitioning power, I think it is still possible, but it's not obviously the only possibility at this point. It would be more historically consistent for us to see a crisis, which is likely to be poverty related. Rather than a world war, it'll just be a huge depression.
I think if it's not mass depression, which would dovetail nicely with the thing that I think that they're wanting, I think the reason that in the West we're seeing demographic replacement and demographic shift, and I don't necessarily just mean racially, I mean along religious lines, ethnic lines, even language. I think that the people behind all of this know they have to break up an ethnos for there to be the destruction they want to build upon the ashes. And I think that the destruction of all of the things has led to this point where we are at a crisis point. Economic collapse, the breakdown of communities, the breakdown of any type of societal cohesion. I think all of these things sort of dovetail together. And I don't necessarily think there's some globalist plot where they have it all lined out like at a UN meeting and they're like, yes, now this year we're going to shift these people here and it's more ha ha ha. I don't think it's like that. I think it's that you have all of these people that realize chaos, disarray, and fractioning homogenous communities leads to ruin, which is what they want. They want depopulation. They want private land to be given up, whether forcibly or because people are desperate so they can buy it up. And they also want us to hate each other and kill each other because that works great for them. It always has. Like we've had many narco-tyranny discussions before. So I think that all of these things could be the spark that blows up the powder keg that they've built. But it does seem like that the economic collapse could be what kicks it off.
I mean, it's
one of the best.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on, Aydin. You go first.
Have either of you read Hayek's The Road to Serfdom?
No, but I am aware of what it is. I think I've listened to part of that on audio before.
He describes basically all of this where, as individual liberties and freedoms are diminished, people will, by the way, give them up and make themselves into serfs by their own seeming volition. Because at the time, in the 1940s, he's looking at it. I don't remember exactly when.
Oh, I have listened to this on audio, and I do largely agree. This is a part of the human condition that I talk about all the time, but why liberalism fails is because not every man has the genetics or even the desire to be king. Most men, I think, want to just be part of greater men's creation.
Yeah, people want to be left alone. I think,
and be chill.
For the most part, people want to be left alone. But if they think that, well, in order to be left alone, there's a lot of psychology there of social identity theory and things like that of my group to do better or something like that, or I'm part of the group that is underneath this government, therefore it's good if the government governs me harder, daddy, or whatever. There's all kinds of psychology involved in that in terms of social interaction or social psychology. But pretty much what Hayek's talking about is exactly this, that people will end up asking for the state to govern them and take over, and that this is sort of inevitable in Western democracies. And he's looking at it from the perspective right after World War II, or right around the time of World War II. But I think that his predictions there seem to be coming to fruition more and more so.
I agree. Uzalu, what were you going to say earlier?
I was going to say one of the best predictors of truth is predictive power, hence predictors. The same thing happens in economics. One of the best ways to make money is to know the future. If you are driving events, whichever direction you're driving them in, you can earn money. If you drive them towards chaos, it creates bigger volatility in the various curves of the way that you could measure it. And if you know when those curves are coming, you can profit from the edges where things change significantly. I think that's the easiest way I could explain why rich and powerful people are trying to create chaos. Soros is probably his main motive for all the things he does. Gates, I think, is a little different with the buying of land. I think he's seeing a much bigger thing in the near future, and he's trying to profit from that. A lot of these big figures about whom theories of conspiracy often come up are probably not the source of the problem. So in some cases, they may be trying to precipitate more problems, but I think mostly it's a natural market reaction. The real source of the problem, I'm not convinced it's anyone. Used to think more so it was, but over time come to the conclusion it might just be natural forces and we're just living in the middle of it, thus looking at who's responsible. Certainly there is malice from these people, but if you're looking for the real source of the problem, it's probably much bigger than any individual or group.
I agree, because I think evil, greedy, psychotic people are also part of the natural order. Like you see that in every civilization going back as long as we can study. But what is sort of new is having systems of governance, trade, and law built by and for being in service to greedy psychopaths to steal from and tyrannize the rest of us. I think that is sort of a new creation of the last couple hundred years. And that's why I have a lot of problems with, quote, liberal democracies and, quote, capitalism.
Yeah.
I don't think those are the problems. I think you got three main things that have come together in the last few decades, roughly half century, that have caused a lot of problems. Globalization, internet, and the technological evolution. I'm maybe missing one or conflating some there, but three big factors. I think mostly the wealthy have benefited. Some of the big changes in the last 50-odd years, which have been very good in general, have almost entirely benefited the wealthy. Oh, and globalized economy, I may have said that. Either way, three big factors. The wealthy have mostly benefited either way. And I think all we're seeing now is the effects of the wealthy who have got too powerful and have tried to wrench onto the edges of that power just a little longer. And as I said, I think usually this would take a lot longer to resolve. People get this powerful this quickly, it would take a lot longer for them to lose it. But because the internet amplifies everything that involves information, we are fortunate enough that we might get through it pretty quickly. Learn a lot from it, but perhaps we have to learn much faster, which is, again, something the internet allows us to do, hopefully.
Indeed.
I think like it probably would have ended if they never tried to do nefarious things to hold on to their power. It might have ended about 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that. But because they are, we have a very different world now. But I think it probably can all be explained by natural forces, just with a very new setting of the modern world. Very different, more change in the last 50 years than at any other time in history.
This walks me to what I wanted to talk about last with you guys. Is there anything you wanted to say in response to that or about neo-feudalism before I move to the last thing, Aydin?
I'm just considering the existence of the powers that be, or whatever you want to call them, the powerful elites that do control much of what happens in all of our lives. And again, I agree. I think that they have different ones have different motivations and rationales. I do think, however, having that much power, and particularly having it often, because there are these old families, that control these big groups, black.
Oh yes,
whatever,
keenly aware.
Around for a long time. You do have like the new self-made, millionaires and billionaires like Bill Gates, who also get involved in this WEF shit. So I think some of them probably have good intentions, but it does come down to, that quote about power, absolute power corrupting. And I say that as a monarchist, but I think maybe they...
Well, here's the thing. I don't care if the person tyrannizing me and sending agents to steal my stuff, I don't care if they have good intentions or not. I care about what they do. And that's why I say revealed preference is all that matters.
Yeah.
And so that's why I am unwilling to give the benefit of the doubt of philanthropy or having a good heart to any of these rich people or oligarchs, or whether it's a Rothschild or a Walton or any of these people. I don't give them any benefit of the doubt, because at the end of the day, they all still contribute to this type of society destroying tyranny and sucking up every single scrap of resource that they can and denying it to all of us.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the intention doesn't really matter if in that case, the action is the same. So I think you're correct on that as well. But I think that these people are so freaking far removed from the average person because they're so incomprehensibly rich. I mean, these are the people who can get away with molesting kids and stuff like that because they're just that rich. They can do whatever the hell they want. And I don't even think they have any kind of understanding of how average people think and feel. They just see it as pieces on a board. At some point, it's dehumanization.
we'll be depending mostly on complacency for the end of this.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Honestly, they've seemed surprisingly non-complacent so far. But
yeah,
it very well could happen. That's what usually ends up happening. If they're too wealthy, too divorced from the patterns of accountability that keep them acting strongly in defense of what's theirs and in defense of their evil schemes, then they will tend to get worse and worse at it. And possibly the best thing we can do, the best thing that is happening, the fact that the thing that the internet is amplifying is just that the world is changing quickly enough that they are less able to adapt to it the more it changes. The culture may be the main thing that's affecting it. And that is the basis, I think, for where this is going to end, is in a cultural shift.
It gives me hope, too, Uzalu. Like, I'm hopeful that we're going to win. I don't think that these evil people are going to lead us to this horrible dystopian, like, I don't know, maybe not as bad as the Matrix, but, like, I don't think that we are going to be a bunch of idiocracy mongrel men that just fuel this machine. I think it's going to fall apart well before then, and I think people with good hearts and strong genetics are going to rise up to conquer and fix what needs conquering and fixing from this. So I'm pretty hopeful about things. But speaking of being hopeful about things, that's going to lead me into the last thing I want to talk about, which is the future and theoretical stuff. But before we get into that, we have 2 more paid chats that came in over on Entropy I want to get to because they are for the panel. Kizza for $5 says, question to the panel. Is the true state of the economy in the USSR, is the true state of the economy in the USSR a prime example of neo-feudalism? It seems to fit the description. At what period of the USSR are you talking about? Like early, late, like when the oligarchs started to pick the bones? That either of you two have anything to say to that?
I'm not very familiar with the economics of the USSR.
I only know basic framework.
So
sorry, because I don't have the prerequisite knowledge or prerequisite guests to give you a good answer for that. I appreciate the $5 though. Last thing here from community engagement, and I did check all the other sites, so I'm not missing anybody. Kizza for $5. Global supply chain issues? ? Or maybe these chains are massive choke points to nations, businesses, and services, and should be destroyed and returned to economic nationalism. But maybe I'm biased. What do you think?
The reason diversity is good is that you need to vary your strategies. Purity is bad because it's not adaptive enough. If you have very pure systems that rely on one very efficient way of doing things, which has worked for you for 50 years, then suddenly it stops working. I mean, for all that time, you're going to have very tight tolerances because it's been working, it's very efficient, it's the best way to do things, but it's not adaptable. That's how something could collapse. So a choke point, yes, for reasons that it's so good.
Yes, and despite how effective in the short term it may be to do terroristic or militaristic attacks from uprising reactionary groups, keep in mind that for the last 50 years, my country and your country have been absolutely gutted from their ability to produce most of the things that we need. So if you go and start using lone wolf terrorism or organized militias to destroy what supply chain infrastructure you have, you're doing massive harm to the capability of your country to get better and fend off the evil. Because then you really are desperate and you really are pushing people to Mad Max levels of necessity, of violence and chaos. And I think that only works in service to the evil ones that I view as our enemies. So I don't support that.
I mean,
one of the things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, I was just saying, well, we certainly saw some elements of that with the trucker protests in Canada. The second that people, it does show the power that people have. Of course, then they all got arrested, or a lot of them did, and had their property seized. Did it ever come out for sure whether or not I think they did euthanize one of their dogs, I believe.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Because they put the dog in the pound because he couldn't come get the dog because they arrested him and then euthanized it. That was a story. I can't confirm that.
Oh yes,
but they did
many such cases.
Right, but that did show the trucker protests in general showed how they still do. The infrastructure is still pretty easy to fuck up if people don't do it. We are still required. It doesn't quite run itself yet.
The last thing that we have is, of course, from Kizza for $5. And this is the last one before we move on to the final segment. He says, remember, all those who gain power are afraid to lose it. Palpatine, for example.
Yeah.
The only thing that can defeat power is more power.
Or you could throw them down a very large pit and watch them explode in blue fire.
That is true. He says that is the one constant in this world, but there's no point in power if it consumes itself. And he says this is a quote from Albert Wesker. I don't know who Albert Wesker or Wesker perhaps
Wesker.
is.
He's the antagonist of the Resident Evil series.
Ah, okay. Well, moving from that then, I wanted to ask the two of you, with this legislation that we see, it's probably like one of the worst examples of scary, big authoritarian boogeyman type legislation that I've ever looked at on my channel. It's very worrying. But let's say that kind of thing actually does move to nightmare scenario, where you have government agencies all across the West with their appointed goon squad going around to people who are trying to live off the grid or have private communities.
Asking you for your potato license.
And use the power of the state to basically come in and take your shit. Like, if, let's say it doesn't actually come to violence because they're gentle with it. At first, what do you think this will mean for food production and for those of us who are trying to build better and build another way away from the system? Parallel builders, private economy people, Mises libertarian types that hate the Keynesian game. What do you think that this would mean for us? Do you think we would just lose? Or do you think that we would win because the enemy would be unwilling to actually start killing us and fighting us with force of arms? What do you two think?
Well, I think
That's really about a balance of the accountability factors in place. Will they have just about enough leeway to make it happen? Will they want to make it happen? Do they actually care? Probably they don't care for the most part unless it starts happening on a large scale. All the people doing it start to get very popular. But it's not particularly likely. People are very dependent on the global supply chain. It will never happen on a large enough scale to actually challenge their power, I don't think. We can have 10 billion people on this planet, but we absolutely require the extremely efficient, optimized systems that have come along with the globalized economy. We can't have that many people if we don't. And so the only options from this point are either we carefully transition to a different type of society, a more honest one, that can still somehow support the power that is required to support this many people, or lots and lots of people will die.
Yeah,
which is why I think perhaps that there is some degree of mercy in some of the ideas of depopulation. If they're absolutely certain that people will starve, it would be more merciful to merely prevent them being born in the first place. Very sick and twisted perspective, and it requires absolute certitude about that dystopian history. And it also brings about the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy that perhaps only because of their efforts that needed to happen in the first place. Of course, there's also the fact that if they're going to make money from that, you can't trust their actual predictive power. You can't trust that they're being honest about what they think is going to happen, especially if they try to make it happen, which they appear to be. So it's very muddled. I think even if you can find good intentions originally, the same patterns of human behavior that lead to some of the stupidest decisions ever made are very much present in these extremely wealthy, powerful people who may well be so detached from humanity that any source of regulation of those insane motives is just gone. Good allegory for governments.
I call it there's a effect in internet research called the Cockpit Effect. And that's how I think a lot of this is. And what the Cockpit Effect is it describes our fancy words is toxic disinhibition on the internet. So when people were trolling and being assholes, it's because you can't really see the other person, even if they're on screen and on a video. Like the level of media richness is so low, the anonymity is so high that people will do terrible things to each other on the internet, obviously. Some of it funny, some of it really not. And one of the reasons that they're able to do that is because they just dehumanize. The other person is depersonalized. They're de-individuated. And because of that, they'll do this awful shit. And in the case of these people, it is possible that some of them think that it's for the good of the world. I mean, I'm a little bit suspicious of that when they do things like buy gigantic multi-billion-dollar mansions on beach fronts while talking about climate change and how we're all going to be underwater in 10 years. That I don't shows me some disingenuity. But ultimately, the intentions, they don't really matter. And I think it's pretty much inevitable that this particular bit of legislation, if it does go through, will be abused, even if the people doing so think, again, that they're just following orders, and that's a whole other area of psychology.
Yeah.
Of the authority mechanisms that make people just kind of want to go along with what they're also have reactance and fight back against it, but both
alternative theory I just came up with for the de-individuation of the internet and the low richness of communication. Perhaps one advantage or perspective that leads to advantage is it levels the playing field with psychopaths who already had that low empathy attachment to people in real life, but now on the internet, everyone gets that power too. So it probably actually reduces the influence of your average psychopath if you engage online.
Why do you think they're terrified of Elon Musk removing some of their control over the marketplace of ideas?
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to point out about what I said the future would look like is because we have seen in the last few hundred years that I don't like to use terms left and right anymore, but the negative element, let's call it the anti-white or the anti-Western element. You guys know I love those words. These people, whether it be in China, whether it be in Russia, whether it be in South America or France, these people do not mind to kill, to stack bodies a mile high when they believe they have the social allowance to do so. And I think that in the information age, this is why I see Jason in the chat. This is why I talk about the Go Free method a lot. This is why I talk about lone wolf terrorism and militias doing violent stuff is bad, because optics, ideas, and social allowance is what actually matters for when and if bullets and missiles get used. And I think that the more ubiquitous information exchange and bringing the truth to people becomes, the harder and harder it will be for there to be an NKVD or some Holodomor again, because there will not be a social acceptance for it. That's why I think these people are so sinister.
They can't do it. They can't do a Holodomor. They have to do it in this backhanded way, so people don't see what's happening. And it's also the reason why I think that's just happening in Australia and not in the US yet. And it's because we have 2A.
Well, that's where I was going next too. That's why I think that you can't refute the presence of the quote unquote well-regulated militia of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. You can't just toss that out and act like that doesn't matter, because when you know that a people are aware of your goals of tyranny, and they know that you are armed and willing to die for what you believe in, I think that forces a very necessary stalemate of these evil merchant lord oligarch types that push all this anti-white crap on us and want to destroy our countries, because they know where the line in the sand is, and they have to get us to walk to that willingly, or we won't go there, and they won't come and make us do it by force, because that's a game they would lose. And I think that the future of subsistence living or building parallel, it has to be through a positive, noble, moral lens of we are doing the right thing and we are open about it, because the more open we are about it, the more that we speak to our brothers and sisters that we have the moral high ground and that we are righteously indignant in the face of anti-white tyranny. I think that is where we can win big socially and force these cretins to not do to us what they plan to do to us. And I think that we can do all of that without hardly any, and hopefully without any bullets fired or military engagements.
And I think that's coming to a head. I think that's coming to a head.
What do you two think about that? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think that I have some of this off? Like, I'd like to hear what the two of you have to think about my idea and my view of where we're headed and the important elements here.
I think you are right. And I think that we can find pretty overt current evidence of that. Now, did people go along with the COVID stuff? And like I said, I'm not saying that the coup is not real or anything like that. I'm just saying that it was a certainly great social experiment for those in power to run. How far can we push people? The answer is pretty goddamn far. And again, they will enforce the rules on each other for no benefit other than social credit. The other thing, though, that we're seeing is the pushback and the family stuff. This crap going on in schools, people taking their kids out of public school because the public schools have shown themselves to be indoctrination centers, without doubt, over this, don't say gay stuff. I think people are, they screwed up by going for the kids. Like that was a miscalculation on their part, I think, of thinking you could just start and have been for years, but come out and overtly say, yeah, we own your kids, and we're going to tell them what they're allowed to think. And people clearly are not standing by that. So
yeah,
and
I think that's why they're losing. Is their mask is off and they can't put it back on. They broke it against the wall the last few years. Like they can't put.
Because they got so far. I think there was a perception after the COVID thing that
and it falls to us to make sure they can't build a new mask. That's the whole point of all the truth telling and the Go Free method and all the stuff that we do is to never let them again be able to put that mask back on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I mentioned earlier 2 things, and I forgot the third. The third is peace. We've had too long with a lack of existential threats. Even near the end of the Soviet Union, it didn't necessarily count as that, but there's been no active existential threats for the people of the West to get up in arms about. That, combined with the tech revolution and the internet, the amplification of culture, and also the globalized economy, these 3 factors have benefited the West in general greatly, but probably more so the wealthy. The wealthy got too powerful, and the natural route for them to follow is to buy governments, because that allows them to become more powerful. Governments and corporations' motives solidified closer together, and they already both want the people to have less power, to enforce less accountability, both through the market and through democracy. So they both maintain that motive. It's in both their interests as a class matter. Owning the press, owning social media, and owning a few other things help a lot to achieve that. So we are living in that time where certain people got too much power, established a new order that allowed them to control the people. And rest assured, people will always be subject to propaganda. Through this time, they have learned better what not to fall for, and so possibly propaganda from 10 years ago wouldn't be nearly as effective. Perhaps we have actually gained knowledge in that regard, but we're never going to be immune by the end of this, and if it comes soon, then it could happen again in the future in a very similar way. But through that time, it's been clearly demonstrated that the cultural victory is not difficult to achieve. In 2016, when Trump and Brexit happened, sure, it was early into the process, but the people already made their decision, essentially, of what they wanted. They wanted actual change, regardless how mean they were being told they were. Same thing in 2020, when Trump won again, but our opponents have just too much power and too little ethical scruples. So they win the election to maintain their power, absolute power. I don't expect they can hold on for very much longer.
So we're going to be careful about talking about the big direction, so to speak. We're going to be careful because they will shit can my channel just like they did yours.
Let's just be clear, Susan. 2020 was the most safest and the securest election of all time. And we all agree.
Remember, the opinions opined here, if they conflict with what MSNBC and CNN say, then you should definitely go with the authoritative sources and not what we talk about, because we're clearly just stating, opinions and things that are factually incorrect, but we're doing so in ignorance and accident. So, check with official sources, of course.
Come to my channel. I'll let my channel be banned before I say something that isn't true.
Well, I've seen you fall on your sword. And I still want to be able to reach as many people as I can with the words I have to say. So if I have to eat a little bit of crow to keep my channel going, then I'm going to eat a little bit of crow. That's just, if you think less of me for that, then I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. I don't want this channel to be, to get the axe.
I very understand. But, I operate on this, I do the same thing, so.
Before we wrap up here, there's one thing I wanted to say about all this. I think that the future, it depends on you at home right now listening. Maybe you're at work, maybe you're mowing your yard, maybe you're listening to your kids play and you're listening to this in your ear. Maybe you're in the cabal and you are a dedicated truth warrior internet autist. Maybe you're in the white well-being community listening from Jason's stream. But I want you to know that the reason I have these conversations and the reason I bring on these people is I want you to hear what we're saying and be empowered with the right ideas and the right language to tell your family, your children, your church, the people in your community to not give up, and that we have not only what's true on our side, but what is morally correct and ethically righteous on our side. And I want to empower you listening right now to go into the world around you, to your family and everybody, and inspire them to keep these tyrants at bay. And if that's the best we can hope for, then that's the best we can hope for. But it's better than just giving up and letting them conquer us and do whatever they want. So that is sort of the message of why I have these discussions and why I talk the way I do.
And I think that's important.
Any closing statements you guys want to give before I read these final super chats and we get out of here?
I just want to say that's super important, because I think one of the strongest mechanisms that those in power, be they governments or individuals, one of their greatest, most powerful tools is people giving up. Is just
right.
Thinking there's no point in trying, becoming sort of despondent to the world and just going, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I won't fight back. I won't do anything. They absolutely rely on people doing that.
For those of you lamenting Uzalu's channel in the chat, I'd like to remind you, Uzalu is just as active as ever. I have his new stream channel on YouTube in the description below. You can also follow him on Odyssey, and he also streams to DLive. And of course, more than anything, you should join the Cabal, because that's where you get access to everything. And I will be going over to the Cabal after this with Aydin and everyone else. I will be there to support and to enjoy the rest of Uzalu's stream tonight. Because remember, he's sharing his stream time with me on my stream right now. And I've put the link in the chat before, and I'm going to put the link in the chat again right now. I highly recommend, like I do in all my streams, that you come check out the Cabal and see if it's for you. It is a great time full of lots of interesting internet people. And I've made some excellent friends there. And I spend more time with that community than about any other community online. So definitely come check us out after this stream, which, speaking of after this stream, we're wrapping up right now. Uzalu, any closing statements, any closing ideas before we read Super Chats and head back to the Cabal?
Only that I meant to emphasize earlier to agree with your point that whilst I understand the motive to want to get directly to the goal, whether that's directly through politics, as Sargon tried years ago, or through violence, even if it can be justified, it probably isn't ever going to be the right approach. It just gives our enemy too much ammo. I was even thinking that maybe for the collective good and not for the individual good, it's better if people aren't armed when the government comes to seize their property, because it looks much worse if the government are just brutalizing people than if there's a gunfight. They can set that up much more nicely for optics. So it's worth taking into account that optics is very important, but that doesn't sound nice to most people because it takes patience and a lot of individual injustice. There is going to be a lot of individual injustice. There always is in times like this. Massive gears of collective change are moving, and they care not even a tiny bit about the individuals that get crushed beneath them. But the gears will move regardless, and the individuals on a large scale can still influence them. This was always going to be won by culture, and it was won shockingly fast. It's just a shame our opponent broke the rules, went beyond what is supposed to be permitted. But exactly. Have patience. That's part of being mature. We are already winning, and we may be surprisingly close to this all being over. Even with their cheating, upping the ante, it may be that there's little more they can do. Our current society does bear the hallmark of one just about ready to change. The only thing I can see affecting it is if there is a global financial disaster and we can't afford food anymore, mass die-offs, governments unlikely to change if they can maintain the impression it's not their fault somehow. But if they can't, then things will change, even if they do that. Governments may, of course, the people in power may not change. That's something to look out for. But yes, we are cursed with living in interesting times. We are at possibly the most interesting time in human history, depending on how you measure it. Good luck. And just to note, I am also on YouTube, live.youtube.uzalu.net. I stream there. That's the place where most of my viewers are, except for my Discord community.
And you can find that link in the description below on both Odyssey and YouTube here. We do have some community engagement. Kizza has been very generous with dollars today. Thank you very much, Kizza. He has 3 things we're going to get through quickly here. First up, for $5 US, he says, never forget that obesity is a bigger problem to humanity than hunger. Also, globalization is not efficient by definition. It's ultimately cheap. It's large, slow, and very fragile. It's not compact, fast, and strong. I understand that you're an autistic engineer. I get that. But I do think that if once Pandora's box is open, it's open. And we are all globally connected now. And that's why I say I don't think any system we've had before is going to get us out of this mess. So we have to come up with new ideas and better ideas moving forward. Next, he says, for $5 US, consider this. Given it's predicted that Africa will have 4 billion people by 2100 and they're the poorest continent, Where is the logic of allowing them to breed when it'll be smarter to impose sterilization on them for the benefit of the world? I don't want to consider that because that's extremely unethical and ugly. I don't want any people to suffer or to be sterilized. It's a very ugly sentiment that I will not further humor. Final chat is from Kizza, of course, 5 USD. He says, the mask is fully removed. Like the emperor who has no clothes, these fools have been made to think the emperor has clothes, whereas we see the naked evil for what it is. And they detest the fact that we see them exactly for what they are. I agree. I think they hate that. And we have to make sure they continue to be exposed forever. And I hope that that is a critical part of us going forward. And everyone listening here, you have to use the correct language, which is why I push the Go Free method all the time. You have to be well equipped with the knowledge, which is why I like to highlight people like Uzalu and Aydin on my streams. I think you could learn a lot about them, or learn a lot about what's going on from them. And then you have to be willing to make a difference and to actually speak on these things, which is where I come in to inspire you and show you the way. So hopefully that is going to tie up the stream in a nice little bow here. And it's been a couple of hours, and I'm very much looking forward to giving my voice a break and going to hang out with the Cabal over with Uzalu on his stream. So I highly recommend you all come and join us there. And at the last second, Matt jumps in, my friend Matt, for $3 US, and he says, excellent guests. Well, thank you very much. And I see you, Popcorn Power. Popcorn Power says, good show, great guests. Thank you very much. All right. Well, with that being said, thank you both for being here. Uzalu, thank you for sharing your stream time with me and putting your ideas into this mix that I wanted to talk about tonight, because these are ideas that are near and dear to me. I'm all about the parallel building and the Mises libertarian hoppy and stuff. I love that kind of thing. Thank you for coming on here to talk to me about it. Thank you, Aydin. The same. I appreciate you. Thanks. I know it's very late for you. Thank you very much. Anything you two want to shill or talk about before we get out of here and go over to the Cabal?
Nope, not for me. Should have a video out in a few days.
Thank you for having me, Yizz. If you want to post links to your channel, then do feel free to put them in the chat in Discord and YouTube. And if I remember, I'll put them in the YouTube description as well.
I have since I got depersoned from Linktree, thankfully one of the beautiful autists in the dissident community made a alternative called Find My Friends. That's FRENS.net. And I have a Find My Friends page, which is just like a Linktree. And I put that in the Cabal.
That's a pretty good idea, actually.
And I'm going to share that in all the chats here for everyone. So this is a good one-stop shop link to share to your friends and family to let them know where they can find me if you want to help promote me. And please do. And with that being said, we're going to get out of here. I hope to see all of you in the Cabal. Shameless shill. I'm putting that link in the chat as we get out of here. The last thing in the chat for me is going to be to join the Cabal. Come check us out. Uzalu's stream continues over there, and that's where you'll find me. And that's where you might also find a lot of other great people that you didn't know that you liked until now. With that being said, keep heart, fight smart, speak the truth. And of course, as always, come back next Monday night at the same time for more Discordant Dragons. I love you all. Have a great week.